Okay, so here we go. This video number one, past the intro for confronting my anger that I definitely want to talk about. So let's get right into it. When you start something, like let's say you start building this house we were talking about in the intro, you have to start with a foundation. And the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is your foundation in your life? I myself, I believe my foundation is God. I'm a Christian man. And there's all sorts of stories that you can relate with this, but essentially, you have to have a strong foundation and you have to place your foundation on something that's not just going to wash away and crumble. If you built your house on sand and stuff happened, it would shift, it would just tear it apart, it wouldn't last. But if you built your house on a rock, then when the storms come, it could actually withstand the storm and have the strength to continue standing for those and to protect those that are inside. So that's a part of building a foundation, but there's a couple different aspects to this foundation that I want to speak about. And one of them is personal accountability. To confront your own anger, you have to want to, you have to be ready for it, and you have to be able to have a level of personal accountability, which means people are going to cause for you to be angry, but you have to be in control over your own response. A lot of times I hear from people the reasons of their problem is because of what somebody else is doing or not doing. And that's not the case for a responsible man. Life happens to everybody. To think that you're the only person that somebody's made mad or is unrealistic. Life is going to happen regardless. But how you respond to it makes the biggest difference. And you have to own your response because you're in control of that. You're pretty much not in control of anything else, which we'll get into in a second. But you're in control of your response, which means you're in control of your anger. Or a lack of anger, or how you deal with situations. Now, staying on the house theme, I talked a little bit before about unviewed rooms in your home. Staying with that, so you build a home, whether it's on sand, on rock, whatever, and your life experiences creates these little compartments, and we call those rooms. And they could be good or they could be bad. But since we're talking about anger, we're going to talk about some of the bad rooms. And some of mine more specific. Where things happen, life happens, and sometimes we just don't want to deal with it. We tuck away family issues. I mean, we all have families. No family. I've not met one perfect family yet. But we all have families, we all have issues with our families, and sometimes we deal with them and sometimes we don't correctly. To throw it out there, sometimes we deal with things like racism. Sometimes we handle dealing with that very wrong, not just for ourselves but for the people around us. And then we also run into situations at our job or dealing with finances. I mean, we all have to live and eat and earn one way or the other. But all these rooms and all these experiences create positive and negative feelings. And in the sense of anger, it's viewed as more negative. And when we don't deal with certain things, we kind of just pack it away in the room. Like we pack away that environment room, like, oh, I grew up in this area and this is how it affected me in a negative way. Or I grew up with this kind of family and it's affected me in this kind of way. Or I grew up around racist people and it affected me a certain way. Or I grew up with this, or I've lived in a certain financial situation and it's affected me in this negative way. And if we don't deal with it correctly, it ends up being a lot of mess in a room. And we shut the door on that room. some people are better at covering it up than others, but eventually somebody is going to open the door. For us men out there, we date women to essentially invite them in our home to protect them. We want to protect women. I know as a married man, I want to protect my wife. I want to be her protector. I want to be Mr. Strong Guy. But here's the problem. If I have a lot of unresolved issues with my environment, with my background, with my family, with you name it, and my wife is dwelling in my home, if she opens one of the doors, which is a trigger, we'll just call it that, if she activates unnecessarily one of these triggers, because I have a loving wife, I do, so she doesn't push my buttons, but by accident she could open one of these doors, and the mess that's inside she has to deal with now, because I wasn't man enough to face my own issue. It's not really fair to her. And on top of that, something that we talked about at our wedding is me protecting her. Is that really me protecting her if I'm sitting there with a room full of dynamite? No, it's not. So I have to take the personal accountability to search out my rooms and know that I have certain things that are unresolved and I need to get them resolved, because I no longer want my wife dwelling in an unsafe home. Where if she says something about my family, or if she says something about my environment, or if she says something about my past that she doesn't even expect to turn into an explosion, that's not good. As well as my kids. I don't want them to grow up like that, and I don't want to pass this along to them. Because my kids are going to learn how a house is supposed to be kept by watching their parents. Which now brings me to asking another question. A lot of questions you have to ask yourself, but who are you surrounded by? What kind of men are you surrounded by that are there to encourage you, but also to help guide you through dealing with things and understand you enough that you don't necessarily have to walk on eggshells with them, that they understand that your heart is to want the best for yourself and for your family and for your community, and they'll love you through it. Are you building the kind of foundation, the kind of relationships with strong men that breed success? I'm not saying you disassociate yourself from somebody that's not perfect or whatever, but you have to have a level of positive consistency in your life. People that are well grounded and aren't easily swayed left and to the right, like the blowing of the wind. When something happens, then they freak out. I mean, that affects you. It's like having just like a bunch of alcoholic friends. Like, odds are you might dip into that. Or you have a bunch of friends that always take you to the strip club. Well, you might go into that. Or guys that are always gambling for something. I'm not sitting here judging people. I'm telling you what, though. It's not going to be good if you go to work drunk. It's not going to be good for your marriage if you go into the strip club. It's not going to. These are some obvious things. And you can't surround yourself with men that are always angry, because that's something that will affect you. And that anger is not good for your family, not good for your life, not good for your health. But the reason why I say on a regular basis, I go to church. I do. And I'm talking about way past just showing up on a Sunday. I'm talking about, do you get together with guys, hang out with them, get to learn who they are? Because I can go to church on a Sunday and talk to somebody for about 3 minutes, and mostly it's going to be like, oh, how's God doing? How's the family? And go Eagles. Right? I mean, everybody knows they can talk to me about sports. But am I really knowing and getting to know who they are? And are they getting to know who I am for real? And are we actually growing? Do they actually know I have anger issues? Most people don't. And that's not good. Because we want to be transparent. I know I want to be transparent. I know I want to grow, and I don't want to stay in the same situation I'm in. I want to keep moving forward. Which brings me to my last point. Are you giving yourself time to think and just to rest? I find myself very busy for a lot of reasons. Doesn't matter if it's my regular job or a side landscaping job, talking in schools, comedy, playing piano, Eagles, husband, father, volunteering at church, boxing coach. That's to name a few. Where am I leaving time for God? Where am I leaving time to slow down and listen to wise people? And when am I sleeping? There's an aspect to anger that you're just going to be irritable if you don't have sleep. Something that can make complete sense if you're irritable because you haven't been sleeping because you're trying to do too much, because your mind's clouded, it's going to explode. Are you giving yourself time, like a day a week? I mean, yesterday I just took the longest day just doing nothing. And I feel refreshed, I really do. But before that, people were starting to say, hey, look, you're looking a little worn out. There's a reason why you're supposed to have one day a week of rest. Help you refocus and recharge, and for you to have a little bit more control over your own emotions. So, really, are you ready to ask yourself some hard questions, and are you ready to look at your foundation? And are you ready to point the finger at yourself to look at the solutions you need to have to solve your anger, and not look to somebody else of what they're doing wrong? Thanks for tuning this up, and we'll just keep moving forward. Have a great day.